Welcome to Focus and Foundation. I am Kelly Phipps with Centerpoint Learning Solutions.
And I am Tina Kramer. I'm the creator of Simple Learning and the patented sound device. In my life, sometimes I use my learning difference as an excuse because there are times, like when we do the podcast, I'll come in totally unprepared and it goes beautifully. And then there are times where I can prepare, put all the amount of time and preparation work into, like you said, what the world tells us that we need to do. And it looked like I'm winging it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the gift. And then also the curse of having a learning difference. And then there are times in my life I use that as an excuse because if I'm totally honest, when I prepare, the trend is I do better.
Right. So what's funny is as I'm listening to you, I'm like that when I'm working with a kid with anybody, what I will say consistently as a reason to use their tools to be focused and to be present and all of those pieces and parts to be completely present in the moment is that when I can be certain. I can be certain. But when I'm not, it's a maybe yes, maybe no. It's not an absolute no, because if it was an absolute no, I'd never do it. We all have those things. I know I am not good at that, and I will not do that because it was either totally humiliating or I'm going to break my neck or whatever. Okay. And then, but most often, part of, I feel like sometimes this toots, like I'm tooting my horn, but I mean, I think there's other people that feel like this too. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm darn good. I'm
Yeah.
good at what I do, and
Yeah.
I'm really good at certain things, and I can wing it. And generally, my winging, yeah, it can look like winging, but it's just as good as most people's normal life. And I know that's kind of like ooh, poofy me, and I don't mean it like that. But I think that's a common experience. It's not just unique to me, it's unique to most individuals who would say that they are honestly that they have some ADD tendencies. They may or may not have ever been diagnosed, but they're those individuals who have those tendencies, and whatever struggles they have not been so huge to keep them from moving ahead. Now, there are some people that, oh my Lanta, they have attention issues and it is debilitating.
Well, and I think it's fair too. We need to look at all topics across life because in the podcast and what we're doing right now, you and I live this. This
Mm-hmm.
is our work.
Mm-hmm.
We're, we were talking and thinking and strategizing on all of this and in as part of our everyday.
Right.
Now, there are things in my life that I would never treat that way. There are things that I know I have to prepare for, and I always prepare for them.
Yes.
You know, um, and there are things that I do that sometimes it doesn't go so well, even though that I've prepared for it. And then the learning difference comes in, and that affects me and my ability to focus. That doesn't happen like it used to. There's an influencer that I follow. She has nothing to do with learning differences, but her name's Rachel Bell. And my social media, I learn from her. And she is like us in presenting. She says she rarely preps for presentations because she goes, I live this. And she says,
Mm-hmm.
by thinking on my feet, I react to my audience. And we both know how to do that.
Right.
However, that doesn't take away from, so oftentimes when you have a learning difference, you do have this, like we have the gift and we have the challenge. I won't say curse. We have the challenge
Right.
that goes along with that learning difference. And when you live with that day and today, sometimes you do use it as an excuse.
To not be prepared. Mm-hmm. Yeah, or not to take the time, not to slow down. And and just like I was like kind of we also have an inflated sense of self that is not accurate. It's not. There's some pieces and parts that are true, but it's not. It's inflated. It's you're no more talented than the next person. It just happens to be that your strength allows you to think faster than maybe the person next door, or you made connections a little quicker than the person next door, right? Or the person in the next seat or whatever. Um, that's what it is, but it gives you this feeling of superiority. I don't know if that's fair, or that Superman, right?
So we're in that area of the more.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate to what you're saying. Now, I agree with the
Absolutely.
daredevil as a person that jumps off mountains and paraglides and rides
I've
motorcycles.
never done that, by the way, because I'm a chicken.
But I've done all that. So the daredevil thing fits me. But then I deal with a lot of confidence issues too. I have a lot of self-esteem stuff. Like I put myself out there but what I'm doing behind the scenes to get myself, okay, we can do this.
Do you think some of that also has to do with life experience, right? Life experience, because the things that um, where you're willing to take risks, and I am not a natural risk taker. I never have been natural. I am impulsive, but I never have been a natural risk taker. Okay. Um, and then whatever confidence issues I've had, because I mean, we all have them to a certain extent. The ones that I've had just because of life and having been in some supportive environments, I've been able to overcome some of those, right? I still have trouble taking risks, but that's why I have people like you that will hold my hand and say, "You can do this, Kelley. Come on, you can do it. You can do it." And then I'm willing to take a risk.
Some sort of gift, because we're in that area of a more, and we talk about more a lot. However, the gift is also the source of the challenge. So one of the things that you mentioned is that we think incredibly fast. So let's back up a little bit and explain what we mean by thinking incredibly fast. So you and I do a lot of work on this. We listen to other people talk about it, and it was a podcast that we were listening to, and the gentleman in that podcast was talking about thinking in pictures. So we almost always are perceptually gifted. Well, if you can imagine watching a movie and the pictures and how fast they go, our minds work that way.
Mm-hmm.
One of the examples that he gave that I loved to help others understand how our minds work is that imagine in our minds we can see the Mona Lisa. Like me just saying that, and if you're out there listening to us right now, you can see Kelley look up. She's looking in her imagination right now to see the Mona Lisa.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we've got it. Okay. Now imagine though, if you don't think the way that we do, and had never seen the Mona Lisa, then you would read about the Mona Lisa and never get to see a picture of her. Now that's where you see us get stumped, because we are looking at the picture of the Mona Lisa in our imaginations, all right? And then how do we describe that picture that's happening in our mind? With a mind that's going,
Mm-hmm.
So then that's where some of the things that Kelley and I teach come in, that we slow our minds down. We look for our words because, again, we articulate actually very well, but we have to slow our minds down. But then sometimes it comes out as a jumble, because if you look at a picture, you get to decide where you're going to describe. And oftentimes we're jumping around in that picture to describe it. And then if you as the listener can't see our picture, you're going, what? What are you talking about? And then that's where one of the concepts that we teach, sequencing, comes in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. So, funny, because as you're describing that, I'm thinking of my own evolution as a learner, and as, I guess, really as a human. In that I have always known I was faster than most people. I got things before people. I didn't know why. So I felt like it was magic, like it was something I wasn't supposed to get. Like because I didn't understand how I could be like that. And because, not to date us, but, way back when, we didn't talk about any of this type of stuff, right? Um, so I met and married my husband, who is very much a visual thinker. Now, I would have never considered myself a visual thinker. I was very pretty literal, but not visual per se, right? I didn't understand what I read. It took me 20 million times. I have to go over and over and over. And so I didn't get that part. Well, between Chuck and I together, right, we produce these wonderful children who have then these learning differences, etc. And as I learned about their learning differences, then I could start applying them to me. And and of course, in going through all the process to learn how to help them, I helped me. Um, and what I realized is I had been watching my children and my husband who had such amazing math minds because they could visualize things and they would talk about things. And I always felt like I was stupid. I mean, seriously, I felt, and for somebody that really doesn't have a confidence issue and who actually thinks they're pretty bright, other people could make you feel really dumb, right?
Mhm.
All right. Um, so what I realized was my speed of thought was keeping me from being able to actually see the pictures that I was producing. Because if
Wow.
you think about being in a car, one of the well, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop just a second to one of the characteristics that oftentimes accompanies someone that is a picture thinker or so that maybe is dyslexic or has some ADD or has some other issues, right, that are out there, is that they can get motion sickness, okay, that they can get sick in a car. And so if you think about that, the reason for that is because as I'm in a fixed place, things are moving past me all the time, right? And if I look at that thing, I'm moving and I get a disorientation, it can cause a physical reaction. So what I realized, I never got sick in a car. I still don't get sick in a car, right? But what I realized is that my mind was moving so fast that if I did try to look, then I was lost. I was lost. I was lost. I was lost. Exactly what you were describing, right? And so as I slowed myself down, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I get this. Oh, and you know what happened? When that happened, all of a sudden I understood math. It wasn't that I couldn't before I could do it. I mean, I could do the numbers, I could do the system, I could follow, but I didn't understand it. And then all of a sudden I understood it. And that happened at 40. And I have to tell you, after doing extremely well in so many different things, to all of a sudden understand something because you could see the picture that you always had, right? That you always had, but you could see it. And it was because I was able to slow my mind down to be present, not be 5 steps ahead
Yeah.
or however far ahead, and not get lost and have to run back and catch back up. I became efficient and here and present, and it was just crazy. So I think that actually being able to do that is what gave me back my confidence
That makes a lot.
because because then all of a sudden I realized all those things I had. But I think that that's common. I don't think I'm unique in that.
Well, and one of our gifts tends to be we can hyper focus. Now, being able to control that hyper focus is amazing, but that's not easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I can hyper focus. I can get tons of work done actually very quickly, but it's getting myself into that. I hear people talk about the state of flow. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there's an argument to be made. We're in flow all the time, but I'm talking about a specific type of flow. So one of the things that I do when I'm creating, so I do a lot of work for social media, I do presentations, and I'm always trying to think, how do I get individuals to understand what a learning difference really is? And I'm looking at all of these pictures. So as I go through that process, it will cause me to disorient. Um, my younger students, they're like, I squirrel. Well, I squirrel a lot. So one of the ways when I'm creating, I can't see my hands here, but one of the ways when I'm saying I'm creating, I've got a pad and a pencil and paper beside me. So this is taking practice, but over time, when I squirrel, I write it down. And then I come back. and then inevitably I'm going to squirrel again. I write that down. I come back because oftentimes the squirrels are some amazing ideas.
Yeah.
And then as I go through that process, usually I can get myself to where I've come back enough, then like that hyper focus kicks in and I can pop out all kinds of stuff. Now I love that about my learning difference, that I can do that.
Now, at one point in my life, I was an individual who got stuck a lot. I didn't know my right from my left. People knew it. It was embarrassing. But I was smart and I did good. I did good. I did well. I worked hard, but I always worked harder than everybody else and yada huda wada, right? Now, and then, I mean, for the last really 15, 17 years, I've had tools and my life is so much better with tools. I think most of us would agree that because of the internet, our kids are, as adults, as everything, we have so much more access to creative things that don't take effort from us. And then what's hard is reality. Reality is a harder place to be at. And so it takes effort to be in reality, right? So so I was thinking when you mentioned the topic today, Tina, I just had a wonderful experience with a 5-year-old, a busy 5-year-old who's just 5. He's 5, and it's hard to sit when you're 5, and it's hard to sit when you're creative. But and I would definitely say this young man is dyslexic because he's also struggling with some things, but he's 5. But he has such insight to life. He says to me, "You do math, you do Minecraft?" I'm like, "Nope, I don't do Minecraft." "Oh, you do Xbox?" "Nope, I don't do Xbox." And he goes through those stuff. He says, "Why don't you do those things?" I said, "Well, because I get caught in those things and I would stay in those things. And I can't make dinner if I'm playing on the Xbox, and I can't make dinner if I'm doing Minecraft. So I don't do those things." And he kind of looked at me and he says, "Right now I'm in creative mode." And I said, "Okay." He says, "That's Minecraft." I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "I'm in creative mode." And then all of a sudden he does some things with clay and he stops and he says, "I'm now in survival." I said, "What is that?" "Survival's when the game wants to kill you." I'm like, "Okay, survival is when the game wants to kill you." He said, "Yep. So now I'm no longer creating. I'm in survival." And you could just see him change. And he looked down at the letters that he had made. And he was like, I said, "Oh." So I said, "Are you using your tools?" And he said, "Yep." I'm like, "All right, there you go." He had this parallel, right? In something that he actively is involved in all of the time. I mean, he loves things like that, and that's great. We want him to. It's a great thing for him in so many ways. And for him to be able to see that when we're being creative, we can do anything. There are no consequences when we're creative in the creative world. But once we hit real life, the game could kill us. There's some consequences. There's some things that are happening, and that it's good to be able to do both. But I'm just thinking, what gifts he has. What gifts he has, and yet in school, he's going to struggle. I mean, I'm going to help him. We're going to get him to a place that he can be in the classroom and take in the information and make the connections. Those things will happen. And maybe it's going to happen slower. Maybe it'll happen faster. Because there's so many facets and factors to that. Way more than what he or I have control over. But the way it's set up, he's probably going to find that some things in school are going to be more difficult than others.
well, not oftentimes, almost always, let's be fair. When you have a learning difference, if we could have been taught experientially, if we could have been taught hands-on the way that we learn, we probably would have never had a learning difference. There's some evidence that actually, especially in the case of dyslexia, the dyslexia does not present until the individual starts school. And then when they start school, they're asked to learn a very specific way. So
Mhm.
if we're doers, if we're high energy, if we're active, if we're creative, if we want to move in our process of learning, and then you think about the typical school day, now this isn't all schools, I know there are exceptions to this, but most.
Mhm.
You're asked to sit for 5 hours and read and be very still and listen. So for an individual that naturally wants to move, has high energy, thinks really fast, all of a sudden we're moving into an area to where they have a disability. And we're starting to see more out there that is saying, no, they don't have a disability. The disability is caused by the way that we're asking them to learn. So this young man,
Mhm.
5,
Mhm.
if this young man could be taught per how he learns, probably would never have, or life wouldn't be as challenging for him.
Exactly.
Uh,
Life wouldn't be as challenging. And I think that's the key thing because the thing is, okay, any way around it, if I am a global thinker, a picture thinker, okay, and okay, that's a key thing. It's and I have a high likelihood of confusion, or have a propensity. I have some things that lend me to question things. Okay, when those two things go together, when I'm trying to think two-dimensionally, it doesn't come naturally. Now, there are some people that are highly creative that think three-dimensionally that don't have any struggle flipping the switch.
right.
Okay, they have all of the talent and very little of the struggle. All right, and that happens, and that's real, and they have this same ability. But then you've got these other ones. What I honestly think, Tina, and I know maybe this is a social comment, it could be, is that we have so many things that are happening in the social world for our kids that are lowering their threshold for confusion. It's making it harder, right? So many things. Yes, the school day and the need to sit and all those things, that's one thing that lowers it, right? But we're a different society today than we were 20 years ago, than 40 years ago, than 60 years ago, right? And we know that this is not something that's been created through, it's part of who we are as development but the disability part comes from lowering our defenses and then putting us in an environment that we might struggle, because we know that if I'm using my tools, okay, if I'm well rested, if I if I'm well rested, if I am honestly feeling like I'm in control, all right, if I'm at that type, I am much more likely and ready to use my tools. And when I say my tools, what I mean is be aware of my thinking. So mindfulness and energy wise. And those two things together allow me to be aware of myself, right? I need to have a sound device. Honestly, I don't need to be like, oh, you need to have a sound device. But it's one of those things. We want to, it's a defense, right? One more thing. I know that if I'm going out um, into a windy situation, and it might be cold, do I want to go in shorts? No, I don't, because I freeze too easily. So my defense, I'm gonna wear pants, or I'm gonna wear a jacket, or I'm preparing
Right,
myself.
right, right.
You wear sunscreen, we're out in the sun, yada huda. We know we're in those situations. When we're in a situation where things are acting on us from the outside, we need to utilize everything we can. And so for us personally, knowing how to be mindful, how to be present, all of those things, and then adding the next layer. And I think the next layer is something like the sound device. It could be audiobooks. It could be, whatever other thing to help feed and control our situation. But yeah.
As I was listening to you talk, it's funny. So there's a memory that I have. I would have been 9, and I decided I wanted to play softball, and went to the first practice. And I was the kid when they threw the ball for me to hit it. I couldn't hit it. Couldn't hit it at all. And I remember the coach probably, I don't know, throwing, and all the other little girls out, waiting for me to hit the ball. We were all young, so at some point in time, they all sat down because I couldn't hit it. So it felt like an eternity at that point in time in my life, but probably 20 minutes, half an hour. And I wasn't safe. You're starting to realize I'm missing. Everybody's getting bored. They're like, geez, come on, hit the ball. And I kept getting more and more unsafe to the point I was missing worse than I had when I started. And so then he moved on to another kid. And I can remember getting home and my dad saying, do you really want to do this? And I responded, yes. And he said, okay, we're going to practice and you're going to figure it out. But when I was working with my dad, I felt safe because he was helping me and he was showing me. And it took a while. I mean, don't get me wrong. My family was one, if you want to do something, then you're going to figure it out and you're going to at least be decent at it. You may not be the best, but so every night after he got home from work, we would work on that. And I figured it out. Now, where my learning difference served me well was that after I had it, I had it. Because I finally got the picture that matched with my body. And then of course the ball coming in, and then I had it. I rarely ever missed. I wasn't an amazing player, but I was pretty darn good. I'm going to sound like you. I was pretty darn good. And then I decided I wanted to pitch because the pitcher on our team was moving away. Knew nothing about that. And then there was a family friend that he played softball and he pitched, and this was an underhanded where he wanted to get this arch on the ball. Literally, Kelly, he showed me how to hold the ball. There's a certain way that you hold it when you pitch. He showed me how to do that. He walked away from me the distance for my league. I threw like 3 to him. By the third one, I was throwing strikes, and he's like, she's got it. Now, I pitched from the time I was 9 until I was 19.
Wow.
So that's where you see the learning difference kick in, because, if that doesn't make any sense. He showed me how to hold the ball. What's that got to do with actually throwing it? But my learning difference, I felt safe. My dad was there with me. This was a nice gentleman. And then it clicked. And then it was in my mind in such a way I could get my body to match what I needed to do. So you and I, we're here. We want to help people. We want to raise awareness about learning differences. But I think we even fall into sometimes looking at the challenges of having a learning difference, and we forget to put the emphasis on the gifts of having a learning difference. So part of our episode today was that we want to share with all of you the gifts that you actually have, and to actually think about the environment that you've been in. And then if we change that environment, would that part of your story even include what the world is saying a learning disability? And so if you come to the conclusion, well, no, I don't think it would, then that's how we can help get the pieces in place that you've been missing, that a learning difference gets to be more of a positive thing.
I think that connecting to that gift is so important. Connecting to the gift and then recognizing that it is there. Whether it's you're really good with animals, right? I can sit there and in our area we have lots of horses. We have a lot of horses and ranch hands and kids that do things that are rodeo or show their animals, and so a lot of my kiddos that I work with have that experience. And so I can always say, how do you approach your horse? How do you approach your sheep? And they'll tell me. I said, why? Because they're going to run away otherwise. Well, exactly. How do you need to approach this task? Because the thing you don't want to run away is your imagination. You want your imagination to stay with you. Don't chase it away, right? Do what you need to do. And they have that. They're like, oh, I know what to do there. I know what that is. Of course I know what to do. They just haven't applied it there because it didn't make sense to them how those two things could go together. And that we are made wonderfully made individuals. And I am a firm believer we have everything we need to be successful. We just need to know how to access it. We don't need to add anything to ourselves. We don't need to take anything away. We just need to know how to access what's there. And so, do you mind if I show my shirt?
No, we got to see your shirt.
This is my thing. I love this. You guys see that?
Yeah.
ADHD means my brain is fast and colorful. And I just think that fits.
Concept popped in my mind, Kelly, as you were telling the story about the children in your area and how you actually use what they do in 4-H to get them to understand how they need to use their tools. There was a teacher that I met with. So I was working with a student that she had both dyslexia and ADHD, and I met with her teacher to try to raise awareness and get her support in the classroom. And that teacher did not understand anything about learning differences. And as I was having the conversation with her, and she was her math teacher, she said, I just don't understand why she has trouble with math. She goes, she's a gorgeous dancer. It's beautiful what she can do. And there are all kinds of steps that she knows and she's learned and she's put those in sequences. She goes, so I don't see why in the world she'd have any trouble remembering math. Now, that particular teacher, I tried to explain to her, but I didn't have any luck. She was closed to the idea. But what we can actually do is use that gift of dance, and we can tie that to math,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'll see a student be very successful in the dance and math.
Yes, yes.
Because you make the connection with how they learn to what they need to do.
Well, what a wonderful episode. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Kelly Phipps, and I am the owner of Centerpoint Learning Solutions.
And I am Tina Kramer, the creator of Simple Learning and the patented sound device. Please like our channel, share with others, make a comment below, and send us any questions that you have. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.